This is the most bone-chilling story I have considering. I feel like I've dealt with the paranormal almost all my life. As a 15-year-old myself, so about a year ago or maybe, to one of my childhood best friends, moved back to our hometown after moving away for a few years, but her dad had to move them into a cousin's house because they moved without having enough money for their own house, and I had never seen the house until I got there after she invited me to spend the night majority of the summer. So I get there and their house was overly run down. I mean the walls, floor, ceiling, everything looked abandoned and not touched for a while. But it didn't bother me at the time, considering I'm not the judgy type. So just a reminder, I got there in the day. So nothing happened during the day until it started getting dark and me and my friend are in her room and her cousin is asleep in the living room when all of a sudden, I see this thing in her closet. It had like staggered teeth, white-looking eyes. It had overly bad wrinkles, it looked hairy and it had these growing-looking horns. It was smiling at me but only showing half of its face. I noticed it about 3 maybe minutes before she did, but everything in me went overly cold and numb, making me unable to talk. When she noticed it, she screamed and immediately started crying. When all of a sudden it disappeared and we heard crawling and scratching sounds from the floor. We did exactly what horror movies say not to do. We look on the floor. Whatever this thing was turned into, what it looked like a woman with black hair and in a white gown with these black-looking long fingers that looked like charcoal. So me and my friend literally jumped back because it scared us, and my feet were at the other end when we see the same hand reach up for my foot to grab it, and I jumped back and my friend said screw this, jumped up and ran out of her room, and whatever it was chased us out, and I was running behind her. And I heard running behind me and stomping, and after we got to the living room, it stopped chasing us and nobody was behind me. We wake her cousin up, tell him what happened. It freaked him TF out and we stayed up for the rest of the night because for the rest of the night we heard running and giggling from a child, even though there wasn't any child, and her cousins with siblings were sleeping and on the other part of the house. Everything goes silent. We start to calm down and then we heard a knock on the door, and at this house, the door we heard a knock on lead outside into the part where you can park your car, and on the other side where the other bedrooms for the house, so anybody could have been knocking on that door, but instead it's a lady with black hair and a white gown again, and she keeps knocking because she wanted us to let her in. We never get up to let her in, and before we knew it, we passed out, and I never went back to that house again.
Master's student here who just came this year. I was running along Gibson Park as my part of routine and workout around 7 a.m. Not much of people around that area at that time. One thing about me is, when I get this goosebumps along my skins, it's basically something must have been strange, and that alone have gotten me to be aware of that area. While I was sitting on a bench, I was looking for signs if someone is looking after for me one way or another, because I just suddenly experienced it off the bat after I took a break from running. The feeling stayed with me for like 20 minutes until I realized those bench I'm sitting with has a memorial engraved loved ones. I did a sign of the cross to pay my respects. And shortly after that, goosebumps fade away, which I was very surprised, and I was looking for other people walking around to tell the same feeling on this area. But apparently that time, I was the only guy left there.
Was in the Navex area, with Island Country, Club's golf course and the reservoir being the border of the area, and we already reached the edge and bashed out into the club premises. There was no fencing, just road crash guards separating the golf course and the jungle. We just stepped over. It was past the exercise cutoff time, but section mate loudly said he was demoralized and wanted to continue finding our last elusive checkpoint. We took a break on the guardrails, while him and another guy went back into the jungle to heard them shouting shortly after and panic running back to us. He was pale AF and the other section mate was supporting him. We could tell something was wrong, so decided to break out the emergency phone call for forensic assistance while walking to Island Country Club, building to be in a more crowded area. Halfway down the service road, he screamed about being followed and shortly blacked out. He came to in less than a minute, but with another personality, deep voice, and superhuman strength. I was 50 pluck, he was 65 Q. 5 of us pinned him down and I sat on his arm and he lifted me off the ground. All that. Long story short, we wrestled him and dragged him to clubhouse. And Chick came, club staff came out, OC and CSM came, calmed him down with prayers and Thai Buddhist amulets. Country club staff asked where we were, said near the water, and they said common sightings of Pontianak around there. But golf course visitors never go near the water. It's past their road barriers and quite a distance in. OC was convinced that his Thai amulets worked. 2 sergeants carried him to their rover to bring him to Nee Soon Medical Center while they told us they didn't cater transport for us, and we had to walk the jungle path back to a bus waiting at our start point. We fast marched that 2 to 3 kilometer back in, all staring at our feet. Never got thigh abrasions so bad before, lol. We reached back camp at 2 a.m. OC woke every cadet, did a quick debrief, and praised us for our bravery. More like scared and just sat on a friend. Dude came back a day after saying he felt like his arms were broken, and he had a week of MC. From then on, every time he threw a tantrum, OC always feared an incomplete exorcism, while we knew he was just brash, and the timid and scared personality he had that night was super off. Edit forgot to mention that the possessed guy said he remembered being grabbed by the ankle while he climbed under a fallen log which his buddy climbed over before him. He looked down and saw a hand, wrist, and an oily mess of what looked like hair. That's when he screamed and kicked and ran out of the forest with his buddy. He also said that a shadowy figure followed us all the way until he blacked out. Don't think any one of us saw the figure, but we saw the aftermath. The two super fit sergeants also told us the next day that, when they were carrying him to their rover, he weighed way more than 65 kg, like they were carrying two people.
I was serving midnight antibiotics in the male cubicle, which has 6 beds. I was attending to one of the patients, closest to the entrance with my back towards the other patients. Halfway through serving antibiotics, I heard a very deep male voice clearly and loudly saying, "Nurse!" across the cubicle. Naturally, I turned my head around trying to see which patient is calling me, although it was dark, but I would still be able to make out if someone is trying to get my attention. However, everyone seems to be fine, so I only walked to each patient to check on them after I was done with the antibiotics. But everyone was sleeping except for one guy still playing with his phone, so I asked him if he had called out for me, but he said he did not and didn't hear anyone else calling for nurse. I was spooked, tbh, haha. The other encounter happened around evening, 6-7 p.m. I was looking for extra towels for one of my patients, but it ran out in linen trolley. So the next possible place to search for towels will be the unoccupied single rooms. The layout single room is that once you enter, there is a short corridor before it. Opens out to the room with the bed. The towels are usually kept in the cupboard, next to the bed, so you will have to turn right to get to the cupboards. So I entered one of the rooms, and just as I was about to turn right to the cupboards, I saw a blackish humanoid figure standing next to cupboard. At that moment, I thought it was a relative waiting in the room for the arrival of a new, incoming patient, so without thinking, I immediately apologized, turned around and left the room. It was when I left the room, then I realized something wasn't right because I didn't see any facial features on that figure.
Friend and I were driving around one night just chatting. We came up on an uphill road in an older neighborhood, and I saw what looked like a black trash bag about halfway up the hill. As my headlights hit it, it looked like eyes reflecting back. I went to swerve around it thinking it was an animal, and it suddenly stood up and looked like a girl in maybe her teens. I slammed on my brakes and she just vanished. My friend asked why I did that as he hadn't seen anything, and I just said I saw something in the road. We continued on, and after a few miles he goes, "Did you see her too?" Turns out, his sister and he had seen something similar a few weeks before in the same spot. Freaked me out. Another time was in my dreams, but I still believe it was a real visit. My son started complaining about seeing a dead guy shortly before he was 2, which was creepy, because we'd never talked about death with him at that point, and nobody in our family had passed during his lifetime. It continued until he was 5-6. He started drawing pictures of this guy. His descriptions were pretty detailed. We gave him monster spray, would tell him if he saw the guy to tell him it was his space and he needed to get out. Once, while everyone was gone, I just started asking questions out loud. No response or anything, until that night, when I had a dream about the guy standing in my closet. He told me who he was. I said I knew. He said he wasn't here to hurt anyone, he was just lonely. I said, "I don't care, you scare my son and you're not welcome. You need to leave." He disappeared. I woke up expecting to see him in my room. Nothing there. But my son never complained about him again. Not once.
I worked at the Atlantic County Courthouse in Mays Landing, New Jersey for many years. It is a historic courthouse built in 1838 and has a long history of being haunted. During my years there, I had several encounters with the unexplained. My experiences ranged from hearing footsteps, voices and crying, to being touched, to actually seeing apparitions. I have seen a disembodied transparent leg walk across a hallway from a wall into the door of a courtroom. It was from the hip to the foot and had no clothing. It was as if someone walked across the hall, but all I saw was their one leg. Another time I sat at my desk, and when I turned around to greet a coworker, I saw a dark-haired man wearing a white shirt and dark pants. He was sitting at a desk against the back wall. As soon as I reacted, the man blinked out of existence. On a different occasion, I parked in the lot behind the building. Attached to the courthouse is the old historic sheriff's house. It remains empty and in a state of disrepair. As I walked up to the door, I looked up at the old house. I saw a brown shape of a head and shoulders staring down at me from the attic window. As I watched, the figure slowly glided back into the room and away from my view. I ran inside and found the guard, who confirmed that the old house is locked down, and no one has been up there all day. I had many more encounters there, and so have most of the employees. I interviewed many employees and recorded their experiences. I complied them, along with mine and self. Published a book about it named The Zaya Zone. Check it out if you have any further interest.